From Radio Cayman Studio, this is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emil Kalinowski, and we're going to be prospecting great power politics today. The decade ahead is going to be transformative, ladies and gentlemen, and perhaps we can make some investments, or at least be on the lookout for investments that will have the wind at their back because of what is taking place around the world. My name is Emil Kalinowski. I'm broadcasting live from the studios of Radio Cayman at 89.9 in Grand Cayman, 93.9 Cayman Brac, Little Cayman, and on YouTube at the Radio Cayman channel. You can see all that live. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last, the outline of the show is we're going to be talking about the metals and mining industry because it appears to be set up for a decade or more of positive news, of critical infrastructure, critical mineral pursuit by nations around the world. And I'm going to explain what the quote-unquote cover story is for this. That's too strong a word, but there's one reason that's being given to us right now as to why countries are pursuing critical minerals, copper, nickel, and various other esoteric metals and sands. But there's another reason. There's another reason that's taking place behind the scenes that is starting to percolate as to why countries are so enthusiastic, so concerned about getting these critical minerals. We're also going to be talking about the metals and mining industry and how, very interestingly, despite all the hubbub, the razzmatazz about critical minerals, about the climate emergency, the industry is not investing in exploration or capital expenditure to maintain production. Why? Why aren't they enthused? We'll talk about it, but what that means, big picture as well. And then at the end of the show, we're going to talk about what I believe is really the driving force behind the urgency that we are seeing around the world in our newspapers almost weekly of some country announcing a new critical mineral investment policy. Now, the story we are told is that the people of the earth have agreed that we are in agreement, that we're friendly with each other, and we have decided to work on a project together, and that is global warming or the climate condition, and we have all agreed that we need to achieve some sort of level of carbon dioxide to keep it from rising to a certain level by 2050. We have goals apparently set out during a Paris Climate Accord a few years ago that we want to limit the growth to 2 degrees centigrade or 1.5 degrees centigrade, as that would be our ideal assumption. And in order to do that, the world must reduce CO2 gases, we are told, and other greenhouse gases to around zero by the mid-century. To reach that goal, 40% of the reduction must take place by 2030. This is the assumptions, the mathematics that are told to us in our newspapers. Recently, the Energy Transitions Commission, which is an international organization of individuals who are in business and who have expertise in this area of work, these are the assumptions they're going around. And this is why we need to make these investments in critical minerals to achieve certain goals by 2050 and 2030, which is right around the corner. We need to be 40% of the way there. So they say. What does that look like in terms of volume? Well, we are told we need to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuels. So we need to move to a clean energy system, we are told by the Energy Transitions Commission. They give a few examples. They say we need to move to wind. Currently, we have 1 terawatt hour of wind available, and we need to scale that up to 14 or 15 by 2050. Solar, 1.2 terawatt hours. We need to get to 26 to 34. That's an increase of 25 times. The power grid. Currently, there are 70 million kilometers of power grid out there. Did you know that? I did not. We need 3 times more, 200 million by 2050. Green hydrogen, less than 1 metric ton. We need to get to 500 to 800, a 500% increase. Incredible. Electric vehicles and batteries, a 60-fold increase. Carbon capture, currently 0.5 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year is sequestered. That needs to increase to 7 to 10 times that, no, 100 times, 7 to 10 gigatons per annum. An incredible increase. Now, so that's just the scale we are told we need to achieve by 2050, 40% of that by 2030. How are we going to do that? We're going to move into clean energy, we are told. What kind of clean energy systems are we going to be using? Solar, wind, nuclear, hydropower. All of that is going to take metals, critical minerals as well, sands, uranium, steel. Copper, for example, is used in solar panels, wind, power grids, electric vehicles, hydrogen electrolyzers, nuclear power, hydropower. Nickel, not so much in wind or nuclear hydropower, very big in electric vehicles and batteries, hydrogen electrolyzers. Steel as well, used everywhere. Aluminum, of course. So there's going to be a big investment necessitated if we're to reach our goals. But does that explain the urgency? It seems like 2050 is so far away. And after all, we have been here before. We have been told in previous episodes. I specifically remember during 2016, there was a big hubbub about investment in green energy. It came to nothing. Then again, in 2018, everyone was agog about green energy, the investments that were needed. Nothing came of it again, despite the fanfare. But something changed since then. 2020 happened. And now, whereas before it was publicity and newspapers and perhaps the metals and mining industry waving the flag about green energy transition and enthusiasm, it didn't really translate into earnest actions by government. Sure, they were earnest with their promises and their enthusiasm for it, but not actually actions, concrete actions. But now that has changed, and we have been hearing about critical mineral plans being released worldwide. Europe, the United States, Canada, India. It's taking place. Now, why might they be doing this? Let's turn to the International Energy Association. Just this month, they released a report with good news. Good news. They said this, that investment in critical minerals is catching up with the world's clean energy ambitions. The Paris-based organization, the International Energy Association, said that investment in critical minerals rose 30% to exceed $40 billion last year, 2022, building on a 20% increase in 2021. Now, there's some question as to whether that is taking place, or if at least the International Energy Association is presenting the best face of what just took place. Now, those numbers they said did take place, but where is that money being spent and by whom? Other agencies, for example, report that yes, there was an increase in the top 40 producers, top 40 mining companies around the world. They did increase, but where did that money go into? What exploration did it go into? Gold. Yes, in 2022, gold topped exploration spending globally. That's not really a critical mineral at all. That's not showing up in any of our wind, solar, power grid, or green hydrogen uses. Not at all. There was some investment increases in copper, lithium, and cobalt. A little bit. But ladies and gentlemen, let us compare the tremendous profits that copper mining companies and other large producers, international diversified coal, iron, gold, copper, lithium, potash, palladium, uranium producers made last year. Over the last 2 years, their operating profits have been tremendous. Perhaps you've seen the large increases in commodity prices, of course. So yes, these producers did increase spending a little bit relative to 2020, and a little bit more in lithium and cobalt relative to previous years, 2013, 2015. But you have to put that in perspective relative to the amount of money they were earning. Copper miners, for example, are at decade lows on spending on sustaining capital and expansion capital as a percent of their operating profit. Yes, they made a little bit more money, therefore they spent a little bit more, but if you take a percentage of how much money they're making, it's at decade lows. That's the same information, that's the same news, the same view if you take a look at not just copper companies, but the 40 largest international companies diversified across all manner of metals and coal as well. Very low percentages, if indeed though actual total dollar value spending is up. Still, nonetheless, the International Energy Agency is happy to report that spending has increased overall, and it is only 2023, and perhaps by 2030 we can make it. At least we're going in the right direction. But here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are going to get to the crux of the story. Here is what the International Energy Agency reported. Quote, the investment that they just said was increasing was led by a surge in Chinese spending, raising concerns that Beijing will extend its control of the market for certain products. That is the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Great power politics has returned to the world. After the end of the Cold War, we believed, some of us believed, that the end of history was upon us, that the liberal democracy was the only way to run a government, and that everyone around the world would see this. The United States had defeated 3 evil empires during the 20th century, and then a small little country such as Iraq, they've displayed their power, they displayed how wonderful it was to have a liberal, open capital market, and it was going to be the end of history. Well, this has happened many times throughout time. It's a mirage, it's a facade. There's never an end to history, and we would return back to the typical great power politics and confrontation that we always have. And we have seen that over the number of years, starting in 2008, 2020. And ladies and gentlemen, now it is no longer okay for Team West to be receiving their critical minerals from countries that are not on the team, such as Russia, such as China. Now, if we were all on the same team and we were really trying to save the environment, if that was really the true concern, there would be no problem that the investment increases were coming from China. But we're not on the same team anymore, unfortunately. We're going to talk more about this after the break. We're going to talk about how much critical minerals are coming from China, the monopoly they have, and what governments around the world are going to be doing about it in the years ahead.
89.9 Radio Cayman helps you to weather the storm during this hurricane season.
One of the most crucial elements of hurricane preparedness is storm awareness. During the season, it is of utmost importance to pay attention to the latest local weather forecast, as hurricanes do not suddenly form or strike. There are various methods of advanced notification. Utilizing such may be the difference between a favorable outcome and disaster. Both television and radio serve as excellent mediums with up-to-the-minute storm path information in the wake of a hurricane. Another method of tracking a hurricane may be only arm's length away. Your smartphone or tablet can be your most valuable tool before, during and after a storm, providing countless numbers of apps with crucial hurricane information. Many apps allow you to track storms with moving radar and satellite imagery, plus offer alerts, current conditions, forecasts, advisories, and even video.
This hurricane preparedness tip was brought to you by your community radio station, Radio Cayman 89.9 FM.
Money Sense, the only personal finance radio show in the Cayman Islands, hosted by Simon Caudry from the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
This is Money Sense.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emil Kalinowski. Simon Caudry is unavailable today, and we're speaking about the great wind at the back of the metals and mining industry for the next decade. Why? Well, we're told because there's a climate emergency, and perhaps there is, and that we need to reach certain goals by 2050 and 2030. But in my experience in the metals and mining industry, such emergencies were present in previous years. And then the urgency that we are now hearing was not present there. The urgency we are now hearing from governments and in the industry is due to the great power competition that is taking place between Team West, Europe, the United States, Japan, Australia, India, versus those people that are not necessarily on Team West, China, Russia. It's a great power competition, and it is no longer safe for Team West to rely on minerals coming from other locations. Now, we're going to talk about what kind of minerals and what they're used for. Here's just a quick example. Maybe you heard about this. In just the last 2 weeks, China announced that it will be imposing export controls on gallium and germanium starting from August 1st. What is gallium? What is germanium? What is it used for? The majority of germanium is used in optical fibers. It is also a common element in transistors. 2/3 of supply comes from China. Gallium, meanwhile, has incredible physical properties that allow no electrical resistance or magnetic flux, in other words, superconductivity, and it's fantastic in use for wind turbines, magnetic resonance imaging, particle accelerators, and other things. China accounts for 95% of world supply. Now, this is in response to the West's export controls on microchips, which China desperately needs. Well, guess what the world needs? It desperately needs gallium and germanium. And now, China is saying, we're not going to be exporting it to you. The very same morning that news broke, China announced that it had stepped into the cobalt market to add an additional 5,000 tons of cobalt to its strategic reserves. Now, China already controls the cobalt market, refining 75% of annual supply, including 90% of the chemical form that's used in lithium-ion batteries for our electric vehicles. But it is also an important metal used in super alloys, which are used in jet engines, ladies and gentlemen. That's a hint where we're going as to what these minerals are truly critical for. Now, in 2010, we got the first inkling that something might be wrong. 2008, 2009, we had the great financial crisis. I believe it was the end of our post-World War II order, the beginning of the end. A couple of years later, China got into a tiff with Japan and said, well, you know what? We're not going to be allowing this particular ship to be leaving China for Japan. That ship was bearing rare earth metals. China controlled 99%, 98, 97% of rare earth metal exports in the world at that time in 2010. Thereafter, the rare earth market immediately started to invest in alternative supplies. That didn't happen in other metals, but in the rare earth market, it happened immediately. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what are rare earths used for? What are they used for? Well, they're used in wind turbines, consumer electronics, energy-saving elevators, robotics, permanent magnets. No big deal. Okay, what's the big deal? They're also used in the F-15 Eagle, the F-16 Fighting Falcon, the F-22 Raptor, the F-35 Lightning jet, the Athena laser weapon system, the Tomahawk missile, JDAM guided bombs, Zumwalt-class destroyers, Humvee military trucks, the M1A2 Abrams tank, Stinger manpad missiles, precision-guided munitions, Patriot missile air defense systems, the MQ-1 Predator, the MQ-9 Reaper drones. Those are just the systems that we've been made aware of. Of course, there are also all those UFOs that we've been hearing about as well. And who knows what kind of metals and minerals they were using there. That's what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. These metals, yes, they're used in electric vehicles. Yes, they're used in wind turbines. That doesn't explain the urgency, the fear that Europe, Japan, China, India, the United States have in securing these metals because of what they're being used for in other military applications. Now, for the longest time, nobody seemed to be talking about this. It just seemed to be in the background. But finally, The Economist released an article, or wrote an article, a week or two ago on this very topic. The headline, Death Metals. These are called critical metals, critical minerals, green metals. But the urgency is due to death metals. They identified 13 of them. 13 of them. 8 of them are controlled and refined by China. Gallium, niobium, tungsten, vanadium, rare earths, cobalt, beryllium, germanium, indium, titanium, antimony, tantalum, zirconium. 8 of them. 2 more are controlled by the Congo, which is heavily invested in by China. So I would say 10 of the 13 are strongly controlled by China. The United States has control of beryllium, Australia zirconium, and Brazil niobium. Antimony, what is it used for? Well, medicine, cosmetics, also a flame retardant used in cable sheathing and ammunition. 81% of United States imports come from abroad. Vanadium, well, it's blended with aluminum in airframes for resistance fatigue prevention. 96% of imports into the United States are required for the United States to get all the vanadium it needs. It needs 96% to come from outside of the world. Indium, 100% of use in the United States comes from abroad. It is used for aircraft engines since the Second World War. Cobalt, 76% of it is imported into the United States. What is it used for? Armor-penetrating munitions, jet engines. Titanium, 88% of it has to come from abroad to the United States. It's an ideal weapons material because it's 45% lighter than steel. Tungsten, the highest melting point of any metal vital for warheads. 50% of it must come from abroad. We can go on. Gallium, germanium, which China just announced that the world can find elsewhere because they don't consider it particularly nice the way Team West has been treating China when it comes to microchips. What is going to take place? What is going to take place? Governments are going to step into the metals and mining industry to fund it, to support it, to invest in it, to propel it. Not just for environmental purposes, perhaps for resiliency, supply chain resiliency, because of what we saw during the COVID lockdowns. Our supply chains are too efficient, too fragile. Okay, so for economic security. But I suggest to you that Australia, India, Japan, the United States, Europe, Canada are going to be supporting their industries for national security purposes. And they already have. They've only just started to. Just to give you an idea, I'm going to list out some of the items that the United States and other countries are doing. But just to give you an idea, in 1940, this is about stockpiles right now. So in 1941, the United States entered the Second World War. The World War had been continuing for at least 2 years officially. The war began in 1939. Unofficially, it had begun in the mid-30s when the fascists in Germany had assimilated Austria, Czechoslovakia. The fascists in Italy had bombed Ethiopia. The Imperial Japanese had invaded China. So the war was already taking place for years before 1939 had begun, when the Allies responded. The United States, 2 more years later, 1941. At that point, the value of the strategic mineral stockpile that the United States had, that's 42 different raw materials, including antimony, beryllium, tungsten, which we just talked about, and their uses. $1 billion, 1941, at the beginning of the war. 11 years later, $42 billion. This is just the stockpile that they built up. $42 billion, a 42-fold increase in 11 years of the United States buying with abandon. Currently, we are back to where we were in 1941. The United States has a stockpile of $1 billion worth of these minerals. Now, the war hasn't started officially, and maybe it never will. But these governments, Team West, are going to be pursuing alliances and agreements internationally. There's a mineral security partnership led by the United States with Australia, Canada, Finland, France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, Sweden, the UK, the US, and the European Union. Australia and India has a critical minerals cooperation agreement. The United States and Japan have a critical minerals agreement as well. Expect more of these between Team West. Also, incredibly, there's going to be funding by governments, direct funding to fund. They're going to offer loans. They're offering tax credits, mining incentive, grants, including direct investment into projects. India has at least 2 joint operations with the private sector where they fund part of the company's private, and the company goes out and makes agreements internationally. They've already made agreements with Argentina and Australia for purchases of lithium. The Australian government has funded $105 billion for a rare earth separation facility in their country. The United States has already made a $2 billion conditional loan agreement for battery recycling. $700 million was offered to develop a lithium project in Nevada. A graphite facility received $102 million in Louisiana. These are just high-level investments. There's more that's going to be taking place. So this industry has the wind at its back for national security, economic security, and perhaps environmental security emergency purposes. And I believe that we're at the beginning of a decade-long run. Now, of course, individual companies may be run well or poorly. Individual metals may be facing supply gluts in the near term, such as copper. But generally, I would say that this is an industry that we should keep our eye on and will be supported in the years, decades ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been my pleasure to speak with you. I can't wait to do it again. It may happen in a fortnight. The show is fortnightly. And I wish you the best day ahead, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
From district to district, moving through the waters to Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. Your station, your voice. All things Cayman. One radio, many people. This is home.
Radio Cayman.